I guess we're doing vampires this week. Great. Welcome back to reading every X-Men comic ever. The series where I read every X-Men comic ever. And man, this is one of the worst weeks in a while. I was expecting next week's New Mutants group to be bad, but this week caught me by surprise with just how not great it is. And that sucks too, because I've been enjoying X Factor for the most part, and we just came off of Judgment War, which I really liked. But the main plot here is just so goddamn lame. I'm getting ahead of myself though. This week, like I mentioned, I'm covering X Factor with issues 51 through 59, and also X Factor Prisoner of Love, which is its own breed of weird, but I'll get into that at the end. Like Uncanny last week, this brings us right up to the edge before Extinction Agenda. Not that you would really know, because the only modicum of possible build up to that event here is the return of the Right, the mutant hate group we saw back in Fall of the Mutants. And even then, I don't know how big of a part they will play. Regardless, let's just get into the actual issues this week, shall we? We start with X Factor returning home after Judgment War, and the ship landing upright to be more of a building base than a ship base. That's cool, I guess. We've seen this already in Uncanny, but we got to see how it came to be here in this first issue, so that's cool, I guess. I feel like there's not really a lot to talk about with these first three issues in terms of like what matters. We get some introductions to Officer Jones, who we already met in Uncanny, but will be important in the big arc this week, and Opal, Bobby's new girlfriend. Jean is also having memory issues from the combining of her psyche with Madeline's and Phoenix's during Inferno. While she may have ejected those personalities during Judgment War, the memories from them are still rocking around in her head and affecting her emotions and judgment. Also, they bring back the fucking Locust for an issue, which, if you don't know who the Locust is, super deep cut villain from Silver Age X-Men. He appeared in one issue before this one, and it was my least favorite issue I think I've ever covered in this series. Why the fuck he returns here, I am baffled, but he does, which is insane. However, I think the most important things that happen in these first few issues, as far as like plot is concerned, is Sabretooth hunting down Morlocks and then spotting Archangel, who he decides to fight, but that fight ends in a draw. And then Caliban shows up looking for a fight with Sabretooth, but finds Archangel instead. So those two fight, and Caliban actually beats Archangel because Archangel was already injured in the fight with Sabretooth. Caliban is probably the most interesting character here, as we haven't really seen much of him since he left with Apocalypse at the end of Fall of the Mutants, and he has obviously been heavily enhanced by APOC. He is faster, stronger, and vulnerable, and has also mastered his fear absorption power that allows him to absorb fear from others and project it back outwards, which is a power I forgot that he had. He's also apparently so powerful now that if he continues on this rampage for long enough, all of mutant kind will need to rally together to defeat him, or it will be the end of mutant kind. Sure, man. Congrats, APOC. You just made the man fittest to survive. I guess your life's work is complete. What the fuck, man? Why? Anyways, because of all the fights, Ward ends up in the hospital, which he hates, thanks to the last time he was in one. So the team knocks him out and brings him back to the base, which he also hates because it belonged to Apocalypse. And also he's losing his mind thanks to a poison he was infected with, thanks to the Sabretooth fight. So he just breaks out of the base and leaves. Jean also leaves, but only for a day or two, to do some soul searching and figure out who she is outside of all these memories that aren't hers. In other words, she has a scheduled appearance in Uncanny X-Men and needs to reason to be missing from this book for an issue or two. The Warren stuff leads us directly into the vampire arc, but before we get there, we have to cover the weirdest issue of X Factor so far, I think, which is X Factor 55. While looking for Warren, Beast runs into his old flame Vera, who doesn't seem to remember who he is, and he really wants to find out why. Turns out she's been enthralled by Mesmero, who was hired by Infectia to get Beast for reasons that are unexplained. Huh? What? What? What was the point of all this? Why is this here? What? This has nothing to do with anything at all that's happening in the book. I guess it's set up for some future conflict, maybe, but it's just so weird and out of place in the current plotline. I guess it's nice to see Vera again after almost 50 issues. Now, I know I try and avoid future spoilers here, but unfortunately for all of you Vera heads out there, if you exist, this is the last time we see Vera. In present day, at least. At least this book has a great cover by Mike Mignola, and the interior art by Terry Shoemaker and Colleen Duranis is pretty good. That's an upside, at least. This issue is just so weird. Why does this issue exist? Why is this... What? That aside, this brings us to the big arc for the week. The one I've teased in the cold open and have mentioned multiple times already. X Factor versus vampires. Not just any vampires, mind you. Psychic vampires. This shit was fucking lame. I'm not really a big vampire guy to begin with, so this arc was already having an uphill battle to win me over. And needless to say, it did not succeed. This arc revolves around Archangel, who, like I mentioned, has gone nuts thanks to the poison, and is just out and about in the city, flying around, unable to really tell what's real and what isn't. He ends up encountering one of the vampires and kills them, but doing so alerts the rest of the vampire group that one of their own is dead and they need to come together to bring the one that killed their colleague into the fold, turning that person into a vampire. They eventually capture Archangel and almost turn him, but right in the nick of time, X Factor show up and Jean kills the head vampire with a box and they all evaporate. I'm skipping over a lot of details, but they don't matter. Much like the rest of the story as a whole. The idea of psychic vampires who feed off of anguish and pain that people have could have been cool if they actually lean into it and showed what the victims were going through or experiencing, but they don't, at least not after the initial concept is introduced. We don't even get to see Angel's pain when they use their power on him, and he's the main character of the arc. His whole thing, post the beatdowns and continuing through this arc, is trying to reconcile with who he was before and who he is now post-apocalypse. Which also sounds great on paper, but for most of the arc, he is high out of his fucking mind and seemingly terrorizing the city. So it's just rarely explored. The one decent bit we get that kind of does something like this, that's actually interesting, is when he's so out of it that he thinks he's normal Warren again and just goes around acting like he would back then, like going to a bank, and we see him see his own reflection and it's of like normal Warren and not Archangel. But that barely lasts an issue before he is captured by the vampires. Speaking of the vampires, they're just so half-assed. This group refers to themselves as the Ravens, and there are 24 of them. And when one of them dies, their circle is broken and they need to find a replacement. Usually it's the person who just killed the previous member. Also, they have the same weaknesses and quirks as normal vampires. They are weak to sunlight, and I think cutting their heads off, and they can't be seen in mirrors or visual devices of any kind. And that's all the lore we get on them. The main one we follow is a woman named Crimson who wants Warren's power for herself, and boy, do we follow her. We get an inordinate amount of scenes with her that are of just her or excerpts from her diary, repeatedly explaining what she wants and who the Ravens are and who she is and her ultimate plans, and none of it fucking matters because Angel just cuts her head off at the end. And all of it boils down to, I hate this group, I want them dead, and Archangel has the power to do that. It's just that repeated over and over again. It sucks. On top of that, we also had Forge and Banshee join the fray to help X Factor, which again would have been great, if not for the weird-ass forced animosity between Scott and Forge, and possible relationship thing between Forge and Jean that is mentioned once and never again. I don't even necessarily hate that Scott dislikes Forge for what happened to Storm, but like, it's so strangely written It's somehow simultaneously written like it's the first time the two are interacting, and also like they have history. Also, there are just like little things in this interaction that bug me, like calling Banshee and Forge X-Men. They aren't. The fact that they retcon the poison from Sabretooth that is affecting Angel to be a capsule, even though it's previously stated that he just doused his claws in poison, and the fact that they connect that capsule to the one that affected Wolverine and Havoc in the Meltdown series, which should not be possible because those two should have no reason to know what Havoc and Wolverine went through of that event. This entire interaction reeks of like a lack of communication between the teams of X Factor and X Men. It's mind-bogglingly, annoyingly infuriating. This arc just kind of sucked as a whole, but at the same time, not enough for me to like fully hate it. It's that weird middle ground where it has moments and some of the art is good and the drama within it is decent, but just a lot of the main stuff we get just feels pointless and boring and inconsistent at times. Our last issue for X Factor is your typical aftermath issue. Archangel finds some solace and balance within himself after what he went through, partially thanks to his new relationship he's formed with Officer Jones. There's a twist with Bobby's new girl Opal at the very end, and Beast has the worst timing ever when it comes to his relationship with Trish. And all of that together ends up being a better single issue than any of the previous 4 issues. Honestly, kind of impressive. This brings us to X Factor Prisoner of Love. And this book is just fucking strange. Beast, having an off day, goes out for a walk and encounters the most beautiful woman he's ever met, who enthralls him and needs his assistance in saving herself from the Dark One. It's this weird kind of Inception like story in a sense where it seems like it's all a dream, but also it wasn't, but you don't really know at the end. I don't really know how to describe it. One thing I can say for sure is that the art by Jackson Weiss and Alfred Ramirez is gorgeous. Similarly to the Scorpio Connection, it's a solidly written story that is completely carried by its art. And as such, it ends up getting the same score of an 8 out of 10. But again, I don't know how else to describe this one. It's very weird. Not a lot really happens. It's just strange. That's the only way I know how to describe it. That's all for this week, though. I hope you all enjoyed this video, and if you did, please hit the like button and comment your thoughts down below. Next up, we finish up the Extinction Agenda prep with New Mutants, so subscribe, hit the bell, and I will see you then.